Hey, hello everyone.
Hi.
Lovely to see you all. Thank you for joining me as usual, Helen and Artie. We have a very special show for you today. Can't quite believe it's happening because this is usually, well, I don't know. I mean, we'll explain why it's unusual as we go. But our special guest today is Rosie Duffield. She'll be turning up around past, and we'll be speaking to her, and getting what I'm hoping people will watch in terms of trying to figure out exactly what's going on in this fight, why she's in trouble, why her opponents are acting in bad faith, and so on and so forth. And because this might be seen by a lot of new people, I thought perhaps we could also not assume that everybody knows who we are. So I'll go first, if you don't mind, because it's my channel. Helen, I do apologize for not putting you first. But my name is Graham Linehan. I have been the subject of a series of harassment campaigns ever since I started talking about women's rights and how they come into conflict with gender ideology, which I believe is incoherent at best and outright dangerous to women, children, and gay people at worst. Helen, perhaps who are you? And
my name is Helen Stanyland. I'm a software engineer in the financial industry, and I sort of was a bit of a feminist for a while, and I stumbled across this issue about 10 years ago on Twitter, and have watched it unfold slowly, and recently much quicker. It's been sort of exponential, I think. Yes. Recently, and I've sort of moved to almost being more than just a problem for women, to being a problem in society as a whole, because of the way this debate is being conducted, the politics of it, the silencing of it, and the changing of the language, and the lies. It's extremely frightening, and I think as a society we really want to pull this over to window back.
Absolutely. Lovely, thank you, Helen. Artie. Who the hell are you?
I'm Artie Morney. I'm Canadian.
Who are you?
I'm a gay man living in Toronto, Canada, and I experienced a lot of gender nonconformity and dysphoria as a child. And I worked in the trans community in my early 20s, in the 90s, and I've seen the gay community and the LGBT, so to speak, community really fall apart over gender identity ideology. And I also have tremendous solidarity and sympathy with women. I was raised by a radical feminist, and I'm seeing this ripping apart women's rights. And I'm profoundly concerned for what's happening to young gender nonconforming boys and girls, to the gay and lesbian community, the lesbian community in particular, and to what's going on with women and girls throughout the world. So I'm profoundly upset and frustrated by what's going on, and I'm doing everything I can, at least online, to make a change in this area. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Good. Well, that's a good introduction. So let's move on to our usual business. I think this week has been dominated by and it has to be said, by the car crash of the Labour Party conference. We have a situation in the UK now where we have we're not able to get fuel. I'm now down to my last tiny bit, so I had to walk my son home today. And we have a Labour Party who has been embroiled in a completely absurd and what's the word? Sorry, I'm trying to find a word. What's the word? Doesn't have to be. When something doesn't have to be. What's that word?
This is unnecessary.
Unnecessary. Kind of confusion. They have bought into a view of trans rights that has been put about by Stonewall throughout society, and it is a view that most trans people, or not most transsexuals certainly, do not agree with. It is basically being used as a kind of a wedge issue by very far left, always online lunatics, and these are the kind of people who have been terrorizing women like J.K. Rowling and Rosie Duffield. And instead of fighting those people, the Labour Party has been so hoodwinked by them that today David Lammy said that he thinks trans women can have a cervix surgically implanted. This is this is a real problem, you know, and it's not just that the discourse has been made toxic and violent and horrific. It's that it has been made confusing and weird, and no one knows the rules. I think that's what this week proved, don't you? That all these people, they don't know what they're defending.
No, it's been a bit of an eye-opener, hasn't it? This issue has suddenly, and I think in huge part, thanks to Rosie Duffield, this issue has now really hit the mainstream in the Labour Party. You know, Angie Marr is asking politicians on the television, why is it transphobic to say that only women have a cervix? And the politicians don't know the answer. They don't know the answer. And actually, I've come to think that they can't answer because they simply don't know. They don't really, they haven't necessarily thought it through, and they don't actually know why it's transphobic, but they have been told that it's transphobic. And there is a huge difference here. Yeah. And this is why they can't really explain their position, because they don't really know what their position is. I mean, and this is very clear from David Lammy's points, that he really is not aware of the issue. I mean, he does think that trans women can have cervixes. He also said today, and this I think was a really, really shocking thing to say on the radio, he said that 1 in 4 trans people commit suicide. He said that 25% of trans people commit suicide, and without particularly looking around him and thinking, hang on, this doesn't sound right. He's simply repeated this, and honestly, he wasn't even challenged on it. There was so much in what he said that that was being challenged, that one just went unchallenged. And I really wanted to say that it's so irresponsible. It's so incredibly irresponsible from a truth point of view, from a how to do politics point of view, but also how awful for both trans people and trans kids' parents to be told this. And it's also absolute rubbish, because honestly, if there was any community where a full quarter of people were killing themselves, it would be an absolute mental health crisis that we'd be throwing so many resources in. But it isn't true. And he said it uncritically. It's astonishing me.
And that's insulting to trans people as much as anyone else. If you're a politician and you're trying to say that you care about the trans issue, then learn about the trans issue. There's a deep. It's almost transphobic to say that you care about the trans issue, but to be too frightened to actually look at it. You know, you have to look at it.
Well, this is the thing. This is another point that we must bring up, because this is very important. The Women's Declaration, I believe, could be them, but I believe the Women's Declaration have offered to meet with David Lammy a number of times, but he refuses to meet with him. So basically, he has been told that these people are bigots and he must not speak to them. And instead, he's being advised by people who are making him go on television in front of a national audience and claim that trans women can have cervixes implanted. You know, David, you don't know what you're talking about, and you're being lied to by your advisors. You've got to realize that. You know, today,
now, for the sake of Canadians, did he say that cervixes can be grown in trans women or something?
No, I think he said they could be surgically put in there.
No, he said he thinks through surgery and hormones and what have you, he believes that trans women can probably get cervixes. That's what he said.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Well,
so
anyway.
a combination of injecting
and growing.
and the important, I mean, this is why I sometimes basically the Labour Party have had now a week of being made to look very silly, and the whole reason for that is because they have been listening to Stonewall, and Stonewall have been feeding them a bunch of lies. You know, if they don't cop on quickly to the actual dynamics of this fight, they're going to just keep walking into huge traps. The only people kind of sinking, the only dinosaurs at the moment, the Labour Party, who don't understand this issue. So, as well as that, so here's another thing where he went, he forgot the usual script, and this is what happens when you don't stick to the script that Stonewall provides. He said that women were hoarding rights, that they were hoarding rights. Now, here's the thing about hoard: if someone is hoarding something, that's because it belongs to them. So
Yes.
I thought.
I hadn't even thought of that.
Well, so this isn't an original thought. This is one of the many clever people who are on Twitter. But I thought that there was no conflict of rights. I thought that trans women and women, their rights were completely aligned. So how can women be hoarding rights if they also belong to trans women? So, you know, it's this kind of insanity and this kind of craziness that we've been seeing for years. I've been fighting this for 3 years now. I just had the police around for the third time because of what I've been talking about, which I must talk about. Actually, I'm not sure I've talked about that yet. You know, it's all in service of something that's simply untenable. It cannot survive. It can't survive scrutiny. It can't survive. You know, like, you know, the self-ID is going to lead to tragedies in Canada and Ireland and in Scotland if it's introduced. It's that simple. And what really worries me about this whole fight, and I said this before, is that someone is going to have to be killed or raped before that obvious truth is discovered by these ideological zealots.
I'm not sure. I'm not even sure that. I mean, you've seen how the conversation moves on, haven't you? When somebody says, okay, well, this wouldn't happen, and then somebody else says, well, this has happened, and then they'll say, oh, well, it's only happened once. So I'm afraid that I think you're wrong, Graham.
It may have to happen a few times.
Well, no, I think what needs to happen is for voters to just vote with their feet and say, I'm not going to vote for a party which tells me as a woman. I mean, Keir Starmer, he said that this was something that shouldn't be said, that only women have cervixes, he said, was something that shouldn't be said. Now, this is a guy who is basically auditioning to be Prime Minister. And he has declared that a basic biological fact about women that virtually all of the population know to be true, and would say regular, ordinary people using regular, ordinary language have been told that this shouldn't be said. Now, that's extraordinarily totalitarian and frightening to me.
Yes, right.
I mean, this isn't just, you know, like a furry on the internet. This is the chap who is the leader of the opposition saying this.
And he's not even saying it would be bad enough if he said, I don't agree with this. He didn't just say, I don't agree with it. He said, people shouldn't believe this. You know,
well, it shouldn't be said. It should not be said.
How can
it possibly be the case that he would be willing to say this shouldn't be said? It doesn't inspire confidence that this isn't going to be something that he will legislate against and prevent women from speaking the truth. So it's very, very worrying, I think, to me. It's an incredibly worrying thing to hear.
It really shows how there's such a moral panic around this issue on the left, that people want so badly to show their progressive credentials, and they don't know how to process the issue of trans. Yes, there are people who are distressed about sex. Yes, there are growing numbers of people who are becoming distressed about sex. Yes, that's a very unusual phenomenon, and it's worthy of compassion. But it doesn't mean we all have to get in line and pretend that biological sex doesn't exist, and that suddenly women's rights need to be disposed of to accommodate an increasingly large number of people who are becoming distressed about sex. And furthermore, people are becoming distressed about sex because of sexism in society, you know.
Yeah, but also,
we've always been distressed about it. We always have.
You know, anorexia and
it's just manifesting in a really bad way right now.
Yeah, but also let me remember. Yeah, the thing about it that I find very, very worrying is that a lot of these kids, and I'm especially worried about young girls. I think young boys are slightly more. Are slightly safer from it because they hopefully generally don't get their penises removed, but young girls are having their breasts removed and are being forced to have hysterectomies in their 20s because of the effects of testosterone on their ovaries and their systems. And these women, these young girls, are being told by each other, because I think they're grooming each other online, and by organizations like Stonewall, that they are literally turning into men. This is a hugely dangerous, appalling thing to say to any young child. And the suicide statistic that I don't think is true now, as you say.
Of course it's not true.
But my worry is it may become true. It may become true, because a lot of these kids are going to find out that there's no gold at the end of the rainbow.
That's right. That they've been lied to. It's reasonable to be upset about the condition of womanhood in society right now because it's terrible. But the answer is not, oh, you can just opt out and become a man and it's just available to you to transform into a literal male. That's just not available. You're being lied to. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and furthermore, it's actually taking away from the women left behind.
That's right.
You know, it used to be that we'd be, well, it's an individualistic opting out, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I'll fix myself, but you know, I actually need you women to stay there in order for me to feel different and like a man. But actually, it's not. It's gone past that to actually removing words that women need to describe themselves. Like the word woman, it's a biological word, but it's also it describes the political being that you then sort of transformed into because you were born with that biology. That's woman means that. And if we are no longer allowed to say that woman means this, we don't have a word to describe ourselves. It's the most astonishing thing. How dare people try and say you don't need it? You don't need it.
Yeah. No, it's an extraordinary situation. And one of the ways that I really want people who are confused about this issue I want them to think of this as fraud. You know, Stonewall is basically committed, as far as I'm concerned, is committed fraud on the whole country. And we're seeing the results of it with, for instance, this absolute car crash in Brighton or wherever they hold it. Is it Brighton? It's always Brighton, isn't it?
Yeah, it's always Brighton.
It's always Brighton.
It's an absolute car crash because, you know, they have been lied to by Stonewall, who they trusted, and they outsourced everything to Stonewall because they didn't trust themselves, because they are not interested in trans people. They're not interested in gay people. They think all that is for someone else to worry about and think about. And they trusted Stonewall. And the same thing has happened to the NHS, to teachers' unions, to institutions all over the UK. They have trusted Stonewall, and Stonewall has sold them a pup. You know, another brilliant example of it, the NHS, Stonewall admitting that Stonewall's bright solution to the problem of trans men not being asked for smear tests is to ask all men to come in for a smear test.
Unbelievable. And this is so upsetting because Stonewall has built up so much. Stonewall's built up so much goodwill because of gay and lesbian rights, which is such a crucial issue. I'm a gay man. I care about gay rights. And I'm so happy to see that people want so badly to show solidarity with people like me. But Stonewall has taken all of that goodwill and exploited it. And it's turned into something that now people can't speak up critically about the excesses of the gender identity ideology movement because they think they're stepping on the toes of gays and lesbians. This is really upsetting to see my movement and my life and my sort of activism completely taken over by an unrelated issue, and everybody's too afraid to offend me.
But it's
so
also,
they're being quiet while women are being abused. Yeah.
But it goes even further, doesn't it? Because I know people who have said, I don't like to see the rainbow now because it just frightens me. It makes me nervous because this is now emblematic of a movement that is extremely hostile to women's boundaries. Extremely hostile to women's boundaries. And so men like you and lesbians are actually being, you know, people, as you say, the goodwill is going, and actually people are less likely to be allies because it's all tied up with something that is actually really hostile to women.
Yeah, because what happens isn't that, okay, they detangle the whole, this isn't actually about gay rights. It's a different thing that I'm allowed to be critical of, and it doesn't mean I dislike gay rights. They keep it together and they just throw them both away. They say, okay, I'm disgusted with what's going on with the excesses of gender identity ideology. That's tied to gay and lesbian rights. Therefore, I'm hostile to gays now. I'm seeing that across the board, you know?
And all this...
Well, we saw that in a survey, didn't we? For the first time, there was a dip in people saying they supported gay and lesbian rights.
Amongst young people, which is even more
amongst young people,
because it's the first time in years that there's been a decline in respect for LGBT people. And it's there's only one reason for it. There's only one reason for it. And it's the source of all of this. And we really, really have to make this clear to people. Straight people are now identifying as queer. They are saying straight, I've shown a bunch of examples on my blog, straight couples, because the woman has short hair and the bloke wears an earring, are suddenly deciding they're part of the gay community. That's not true. It's a lie. And to make these people comfortable within the LGBT community, they are actually putting gay people, trans people, women in danger. You know, they're all in danger. Did you see in Australia, those parents lost their appeal? So their kid is being taken away from them and is going to be put on cross-sex hormones against their will. It is the most appalling, vicious bit of forced, conversion therapy I've ever seen. And another aspect of this that people may be confused by, when they hear conversion therapy about trans people and gay people, they must remember that trans is not defined. There is no definition of trans. It is not a stable category. So there is no such thing as trans conversion therapy. In fact, gay conversion therapy is what I would call trans affirmative care. Trans affirmative health care is a form, or can be, and is too often a form of gay conversion therapy. We've all seen reports from the Tavistock of parents who took their kids in to get them so-called fixed because they were gender non-conforming. Helen Weberly's trial has just recently started talking about how they prescribe these drugs to kids, and toys and clothes are brought up as a reason. This is an appalling movement. It is a dark, dark movement, and it's already made too many gains.
Dennis Kavanaugh made a really good tweet today saying, in response to Helen Weberly talking about how it was toys and, just preferences for things that are sort of gendered in the other sex, that it's like you're being sent to the gender abattoir. If a child is gender non-conforming, they have, if they don't hide it, then they're going to be sent off to have their body. They're going to be pegged as transgender, and then they're going to have their body modified, and they're going to be on drugs, and they're going to be on meds for the rest of their lives. It's really frightening. Yeah.
Someone was telling me today, can't say who, I don't think I can say who, but she was saying that some young trans men, in other words, young girls who think they're boys and who believe they're boys, think that their clitoris is a smaller penis. This is one of the things they've been told, Yes. I mean, the sheer level of confusion it's off the charts. And if David Lammy shares it, then we really are in trouble. Yeah. Because, the 1 in 4 number may not be true, but it may well become true if we don't start paying attention,
And we have to clarify that this isn't just, the question of like what people think it's a word game, that you can offer up the word woman and you can keep female. We can say, okay, woman and man now mean, these social categories, and a female person can now be a man and a male person can now be a woman. They think that's a sort of offering that they can make, So when they're saying men can have a cervix, they're really saying they're playing a word game around the word man. But that is a dark road to go down. I think a lot of people don't realize it's not that. They think that's just that there's not too much price to pay there. It's they can calculate that's a small enough sacrifice, and for the greater good of the small number of transgender people with distress over their sex, that's something we can offer them, and therefore I remain egalitarian, and this aligns with my liberal principles of inclusion. They don't realize that is the beginning of a very dark road, because it doesn't stop with just offering up the words woman and man. It goes from there to like, therefore, biological sex doesn't matter in sport. Biological sex doesn't matter in safe spaces. Biological sex doesn't matter in medicine. It doesn't stop there. These words are not available to be offered up. Woman means adult human female. Man means adult human male. We understand that there are some people who want to live in the social roles that change, that sort of, we live in a gendered society, and there's some weird stuff going on around gender, but woman still means adult human female, and man still means adult human male, Yeah.
And you see this with the fact that we did. I mean, I think we said this last week. There was some sort of people thought, well, let's just compromise. We'll expand women, but we'll keep female. But now I see so many people, so many trans women saying, well, I'm female. I'm female. It doesn't stop. It doesn't. Yeah. I'm afraid. And so at some point, you just have to say, no, look, we can have women, trans women, men, and trans men. These are decent categories. But but in terms of biology, you must have a word. We need a word that works.
I wonder also whether, though, I mean, words like trans women, I try and avoid them now because, you know, you saw the confusion. Another one that happened today. This one was quite sweet because the guy was defending Rosie, but he was an Indian MP. I'm not sure of his name, but he was actually defending Rosie, and you know, he thought trans man meant trans woman.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, we've said before, it's deliberately done this way, right?
Exactly.
Doesn't it? Because you can then say, well, trans women are women. It's in the word. I mean, so many times have we seen this.
And that confusion that we're talking about, this confusion that Stonewall has sowed around the UK into the fabric of our laws and NHS documents and so on, this utter madness and confusion, you know, it's so unnecessary. It doesn't have to be this way. If we start using clearer terms, if we start saying what we mean, if we ignore this bullshit that misgendering is going to kill people, you know, and start talking about, listen, there are some places, sometimes when we have to, you know, be very specific, you know, we have to be, it protects people. It stops people from being confused. They pass good laws, you know. This is what Stonewall will prevent if people keep following their advice, you know. Sorry, I actually lost the run of my sentence there a little bit. I'm so excited.
No, that was great.
I wanted to say something else about this. Is that I noticed David Lammy both saying that this isn't an issue that comes up on the doorstep, and he's also tweeted after it saying, you know, climate crisis, energy shortage, gaps in staffing, you know, these are issues that the public and UK Labour are focused on today. It is journalists, not us politicians, who are obsessed with talking identity politics. Now, this is such a cop-out, isn't it? Women have been wanting to talk about this issue. We've been desperate to talk about this issue. The no debate has been preventing us from talking about this issue. We've been shouting about it. And for a Labour politician now that the issue has come to the fore, is to say, oh, well, we don't want to talk about it. I mean, it's astonishing. It's an absolute admission, isn't it? That he really just doesn't care about women wanting to talk about it. We need to talk about it.
That's what this whole week proved. This whole week proved that the subject matter of women's rights is so low on their radar that they didn't even see the giant. I mean, you know, they talk about women being dinosaurs. The Labour Party just wandered into a giant tar pit.
But listen, they don't. Women aren't even asking for they're not even saying you have to agree with me. They're literally saying, can we just talk about this? Can I at least plead my case? And men are just like, no, you can't even plead your case. You know,
exactly. Listen,
it's appalling. Yeah.
Before I bring Rosie's here, so before I bring her in, I'm just going to make a little announcement because I've got some very, very good news before Rosie turns up. Marion Miller is going to reopen her crowdfunder. And she wanted me to say that the first time when the kind of lunatics like, well, I won't say any names, but when lunatics came after her, they kind of did what they normally do, which is they confused her about it. She thought money was going to start going to people like mermaids, and she panicked and she closed it down. So this next crowdfunder that you see up, and we'll put it in the links below this video, that's the one to use. The money will all go to her legal team.
Excellent.
It is going to be entirely used for Marion Miller's legal defense. So please contribute and feel confident while you're contributing. Okay.
Wonderful.
Now's a big moment. Let's have Rosie in. Rosie, lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello.
Thanks for having me. Hi.
Oh, it's very good of you to turn up. I am still kind of astonished that you did it. But I tell people that I think you realize something I realized when I got into this fight, because I was originally marked for liking tweets, and I think that's what happened to you too, isn't it? Isn't that what was your earliest transgression according to them?
Oh God, I'm not sure. I mean, I think I was wokier than now when I first sort of got onto Twitter, and you know, Labour MPs follow minorities and want to support them, and that's, you know, what I've always been about. And I grew up knowing about gay rights sort of in the 80s and all of those things. So I've always been interested in that. I've gone to Pride forever, you know. And I started sort of watching your Twitter account and other people's and thinking, I'm really uncomfortable with some of this, but I would still tweet sort of, you know, really pro-trans things. And I was, you know, trying to understand how horrendous it must be to be trans. And I got to know a few trans people in the Labour Party and activists and things. And I thought, you know, of course they deserve their rights. But then I realised that, you know, we were losing our language. And when Piers did his tweet, I just thought, I've got to kind of just go out there. I've got to like that tweet. I've got to just say, come on, this is ridiculous. And it was semi-serious. He was kind of just joking how silly it was, wasn't he? So I thought,
no, that tweet, he just said something about in defense of the fact that only women have cervixes. Is that right?
Yeah.
He said, do you mean women?
It was a medical post, wasn't it? It was a medical post saying, you know, let's forget to advise, I think it was American or something, let's forget to advise people with cervixes to go and have a smear test. And he just went, do you mean women? You know, exclamation mark. And I thought, well, yeah, since when did we become erased from those kind of conversations? But there is a more serious point about the words we use. And I've had so many discussions with people who are concerned about migrant women in their area. Kent has a lot of asylum seekers, and women come over often not fully speaking English. If their husbands are in the doctors or something like that, they see the posters, they don't really know the services of the NHS yet. It's a real thing. You know, I've had people writing to me about it. So it is really important we use the right words, actually.
And when you did like that tweet, were you kind of surprised at how much focus it got and how vicious the backlash was?
Yes and no, because the first person who sort of brought it to the world's attention was someone who'd absolutely loathed me because I didn't adore Jeremy Corbyn. So it was the same people that had been trolling me since I got elected, pretty much, and since I put my head above the parapet over anti-Semitism. But it is also worthwhile saying that those were just mostly local activists. And I've always said since I got elected that the thing that unites us in Parliament is just being women. We're still only a third of the House. You're then partisan. And I'm so humbled, actually, by the fact that women on the far left of the party traditionally have kind of embraced me and almost forgiven what they see as my kind of betrayal of Jeremy Corbyn, just to kind of unite over this issue. And that is really humbling, because I know they've had to park their feelings about me from before, and I'm really grateful to them for that, because it must have been difficult, actually.
Well, it's such a strange. Sorry, go ahead, Ellen.
So I wanted to say, you know, you have actually in putting your head above the parapet there, you have brought this issue. You've done a huge amount to bring this issue to the public. You know, we've been talking about it for the last decade. But now it's mainstream. It is mainstream, and we thank you for that. You've put up with a lot in order to get us here. But now we are here, and Andrew Marr is asking these questions of politicians on national TV. You know, people are hearing about it.
Yes.
And I have to say, as a gay man, I really appreciate that you have been so supportive of the LGBT community as such. And I don't think that's a coincidence that it's that you feel so much empathy for lesbians and gays and for the gay community, that you're starting to see that it's okay to be a little bit critical of an issue that touches on that. I think sometimes it's a bit of a Nixon in China kind of situation, that you have to be confident that you're not going to be pegged as homophobic, and you have to be confident that you know, that you trust, that you have faith in the LGBT community, that you know when to say that there are problems within it. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for saying that, Artie, because you know, it's the most hurtful insult that's been thrown at me is about being homophobic or biphobic or transphobic even. But you know, the idea that someone who's spent my entire kind of teenage and adult life working with gay people and gay rights as much as I could and being an ally, that's really deeply hurtful, actually.
Yes,
so
I know.
You know, there's very few things important to me.
Let's remember, people may not notice this, but Fred Sargent, who was actually at Stonewall, was thrown off Twitter and is considered and is himself called phobic because he doesn't agree with this ideology.
The man who founded the first gay pride march in the world.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
I mean,
and in fact, I mean, I just say to Helen, actually, she's saying that I've brought this to the world stage. It is incredibly important that people like me who've come along now acknowledge all of the things that you guys have done, because you were incredibly, I mean, you know, all of the stuff that you've said and done has led me here, and sort of, you know, you've walked through the streets on your own with a kind of torch going, look at me, and it's terrifying. And it's scary for me in Parliament, kind of looking behind me and going, oh my God, everyone hates me and no one's backing me up. But you guys were there first, and you taught me what was going on, and you were much braver. And Graham being completely, you know, obliterated by Twitter must have been pretty horrible.
Ah,
So
well, you know, thank you very much. That means a lot. That really means a lot. I mean, that's what we're always trying to do. We're always trying to show people it is possible to speak about this without hurting people's feelings. It's possible to kind of find a way through it. The big issue for me at the moment, and I don't know whether you agree with this, Rosie, but we were just saying earlier that I genuinely believe that Stonewall have been involved in fraud. You know, by misrepresenting. I don't want you to say something that will get a headline out of that, but by misrepresenting the Equality Act, they have led so many different organizations and institutions into a very confused and into a place that's going to take a lot of money to undo.
Yeah, I mean, lots of people interpret the law as they want it to be, don't they? And, you know, there's a certain degree of kind of license allowing people to do that, I suppose, not with murder and things, obviously, but you know, but in terms of kind of legislation that might suit your agenda, I can understand why they would try and interpret it a different way, but they have been incredibly misleading, and companies have paid a vast amount of money to sign up for what is essentially their kind of equalities advice, and, you know, let's be as friendly as possible. And who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want to sign up in good faith to make their workplaces completely diverse and friendly and open and safe for everyone? But their advice seems to be really quite peculiar at times, and their take on the law is as they would want it to be, not as it actually is at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But we know that this is something that can actually work, because a lot of the law is how you interpret it. Like, you know, you have a 20-mile-an-hour limit, but you know, it's kind of interpreted as sort of 25, isn't it? And that's sort of what people do. So Stonewall know exactly what they're doing, and so this is why, you know, we have to point it out. We have to say, I mean, what we would like is a full and absolute clarification from the government on women's single-sex spaces. We only want it in a tiny number of areas. And like we've said so many times, we're not really asking for a lot. Just a full, like a clarification, and, you know, absolutely spaces for trans people to feel safe. This is something that should also be considered. But women do have the right just to have these few spaces away from male-born people in some small areas.
Who came around and knocked on our front door and said, you know, those spaces that you've always thought you could escape to if you needed, you know, women and girls loos and, you know, single-sex services. Is it okay if we just give those to a load of other people without asking you? No one asked me, and no one asked actually. So, excuse me, no, thank you. You know.
Good for you. That's brilliant to hear. What do you think? Do you like this week? It's obviously a tough time for the government. They've got you know, the fuel crisis going on and so forth, and Labour haven't really been able to take advantage of that this week because they've been embroiled in this. Do you see any way for them out of this kind of trap that they've kind of stepped into themselves?
Well, I'm not going to help them step out anytime soon. I want to see us shift and at least have the conversation. And I would hope that the embarrassment that has been levelled at some of my colleagues and just us as a party over this would at least shift the narrative a bit, would at least just say, come on. I mean, some of those people that have been interviewed have been so woefully out of their depth. I think you've probably covered that before I got here. But, you know, it's totally embarrassing. And this is something we're supposed to be all over. You know, these are legal points that we're arguing or potentially arguing in Parliament any time now. You know, it's a talking point for people and for our CLPs, you know, for our members actually. And yet people don't seem to have any idea. There's loads of things I don't understand. I don't understand quantitative easing. I really don't. I can't even say it. But I'm not sort of doing interviews based on that. You know, if I was, I hope I would at least read up on it a little bit or talk to colleagues who know a lot more about that than I do. But nobody asked my point of view before they did an interview over me. Every single one of them has my phone number. If they'd even just picked the phone up and said, I'm going to be doing an interview, they're going to be asking me that, what should I say? What are your views even? But, you know, and then I can decide what not to say and what to say. No one did. And then they were all quite embarrassed about not knowing what the argument was. And I think that is because we haven't talked about it. You know, it took me a very long time to get a meeting with the leader of this party and, you know, my party. And I still don't think he's particularly au fait with all of the groups who are trying to talk about this. Labour Women's Declaration have been asking to see him for a while. They have 6,000 or 7,000 signatures plus now. Those are all Labour members. We should be listening to groups that big and finding out what the arguments are.
No, it's true, because I was thinking about this earlier, despite the fact that we're always smeared as being right wing, like I would say 99% of the women that I know on Twitter embroiled in this issue are left. They are Labour voters traditionally. Yeah. And honestly, we want to vote Labour. We want the party to take some notice of us, to listen to the arguments, and then to say, look, here's a compromise. A compromise should be very, very easy to achieve. I genuinely believe this. It's not that difficult. But honestly, we've still got some members of the party who are saying there is no conflict. When there's clearly a conflict. We're talking about it. The fact that we're here now is a conflict. But at least we've got to recognise there's a conflict. Now, I do think that this week it's been recognised. You know, as you say, people have been embarrassed on the television, on the radio over it. And so, but they've got an opportunity now to think, okay, this is an issue that we have to consider. We can't say no debate. We can't ignore it any longer. We do have to talk about it. Let's see what the actual issue is, and let's try and find a way out.
May I also add something to your point, Rosie? It's not just that this is going. I don't think it's going to be. It's not just that Labour are betraying women on the kind of, you know, who are going to vote. Labour have, by going along with the idea that women are just, the women complaining about this are just a bunch of bigots, they are endangering of in fact, I think they probably already alienated a huge part of their activist base. You're insulting women like Helen Steele and women like Linda Bellos. You know, you're betraying those women for the benefit of people who don't even know what they're talking about, you know? Like, where do you think this is kind of, how much would you put this as a kind of a problem amongst people who, well, I don't know, a generational problem? I mean, how do we address the generational aspect of this?
I did used to think that it was very clear lines, because Twitter, of course, kind of polarizes everything and makes you think that it is, you know, everyone under kind of, I don't know, 30 feels the same way. But I met a couple of much younger women yesterday who were more frightened about coming forward because of the sort of age cutoff, if you like, and they're at universities and things like that. But I think it's like any issue. It isn't just actually an age sort of, it's not in silos like that. I don't think it's that straightforward. But in terms of the language and in terms of dinosaurs like me, understanding younger people and their views on, I mean, what do people our age know about non-binary, choosing not to be male or female? This is a whole new thing for all of us. Most politicians are around about my age. So we do need to talk to young people. We do need to find out, what are your issues? Why are you rejecting? I want to ask, why are you rejecting mostly being female, being a woman? Don't we need to say, where's that coming from? You know.
Yeah.
Yes, we really do.
You know, Joe tried to ask that question, I think, on Twitter and got sort of cancelled and stuff. But yeah, so the age thing is an important, you know, in all things of politics, we can't just serve people our age. We need to ask people much younger, what's going on?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I find most frightening about this is that dysphoria is not is being actively encouraged by some of this ideology. You know, that's what I find really frightening. And it just seems that there's a kind of idea that, it won't matter if a young person decides to be fluid with their gender and so on. And the fact is that it seems to lead to a lot of confusion, and a lot of people seem to think that it needs to. There's doctors now doing surgeries in America for supposedly non-binary people. They're removing their nipples because that someone has decided that non-binary means you take your nipples off. It's just an absolute outrage, you know. But anyway, sorry.
I think those decisions, though, guys. I mean, obviously, making those decisions when you're so young. Be who you want to be. Experiment. You know, do whatever you want to do. But to cut your body parts off and then render yourself completely infertile, or to make decisions that you cannot ever reverse. That is
I know. I made so many bad fashion decisions as a young goth teen. I went all in on goth, and it's so embarrassing. My hairstyle choices were disastrous, but hair grows back. Nipples don't, you know.
Yeah. I mean, we've had young people on this show, haven't we? We had that poor chap who'd had his testicles removed when he was around 20, and then when he was about 21 he regretted it. It was after that 60 Minutes interview, remember, they came on to talk a bit more, and it was devastating. Yes, it was a devastating thing. So, you know, that does need talking about. I mean, because you know, this is sort of, it can be divided up into three areas, can't it? You've got language and silencing, the sort of totalitarian part of it, and then you've got the actual women's spaces, and you've also got then the children issue, and you know, they're obviously all intertwined, but they are really quite distinct as well. You know, they need different, they need addressing in different ways and different solutions, because it's sort of woven its way right through society now. And
that's the other thing we're doing, isn't it? We say trans people, we group everyone together, and actually the wider society needs to understand how we even got there, don't we? I think, you know, if I was to describe non-binary to my mum who's in her 70s, she'd be like, what? You know, completely confused.
Well, that's a really important point, because I think one of the kind of linguistic achievements that this movement has made is that people think that there is a word trans that describes all these different people. The word trans, a person suffering from dysphoria because they're a teenage girl, has nothing in common with someone like Stephanie Hayden or someone else who decides to transition when they're already a middle-aged man. They have nothing in common. And this has been used, the word trans and transphobia has been used to shut these conversations down.
Absolutely.
And they are to a large extent devoid of meaning.
No, I want to talk about this because I am a gay man and I worked at a trans bar. I've known many transsexuals who are decent people, some of whom absolutely recognize the reality of biological sex, some of whom are a little bit traumatized around that, but that's okay. You know, we could disagree with maybe their beliefs, but understand that they're decent people. What's going on a little bit? Sometimes people think that even though we know that some of these people who identify as trans women aren't really women, they have so much, you know, they're so feminine in demeanor and in behavior. It's only a matter of technicality that they aren't women. But what people don't understand is sometimes you might argue that you might find someone who's just so feminine and so in solidarity with females that you want to treat them socially like they're a woman. But there are a lot of people who identify as trans who aren't like that at all. You know, the word trans is not a proxy for vulnerable. It's not a proxy for feminine. It's not a proxy for not like other men. The word trans is not a proxy for these things, you know? Yeah.
Absolutely. But Graham just
sorry, what were you going to say, Rosie?
Someone at court who's on a rape charge, for example, and decides that they are going to use different pronouns, therefore everyone has to. That's incredibly worlds away from a young person who's going through this kind of searching for their own identity. What do they want to be? Are they non-binary? Are they trans? You know, that person is going through a genuine journey of like self-discovery, right? I mean, not wanting to hurt any other human being. But if you're talking about men using, you know, grown men who've lived as men, suddenly going, well, you know what, actually, you know, and then maybe going into women's prison, that does not represent my trans friends at all, or the people that I know. You know, and we cannot lump everyone all together like that, I think.
No, and we could trans also, like, you know, if we did, I'm trying to put myself in the mind of somebody who's trying to say it's okay to make some exceptions and let some males into women's spaces and recategorize some males as women for all intents and purposes. I don't agree with that. But trying to put myself in that mind, what would the criteria be? What kind of male person, what qualities would they have that we would want to recategorize them as women and take away all the exemptions, you know, that prevent men from going to women's spaces? I would say this would be someone who has shown without failing that they are not a danger to women, that they have compassion and empathy with women, and that women get along with them, theoretically. But the word trans isn't that. A lot of people who identify as trans, that just means that man wants to be in women's spaces, you know? That just means that man wants to identify as women. It doesn't mean women have said that they see that man as a fellow woman. It just means that man says that he wants to be seen as a fellow woman. So at the end of the day, when we're saying the word trans means we should categorize someone as a woman, we're saying if a man says he wants this, he gets it. And it's not about if a woman says she invites this. You know,
that's a really good question. I mean, again, these are sort of critical thinking bits and arguments that we've missed out because everything's gone straight to social media, and we are kind of even at the point of potentially legislating straight from social media. You know, if we don't go through, usually these great social changes go through what, at least a generation of discussion, don't they? To get to gay rights, we had to have people really suffering for a long time. I don't want that for trans people, but we have to get to the point where we've thought about all of those things you've just raised, discuss them frankly, you know, let trans people kind of, you know, explain to us what they need and want as well as the other way around. It's, you know, it's vital we talk about these things openly, but we're not allowed to do that. And we're not encouraged to do that. And we've got parties making decisions without that discussion or debate. It's extraordinary. We don't do that over anything else. We don't do that over
that's right.
These,
Can I just say, can I just say that it's, I kind of thought that this would happen, but we have many, many more trolls in our chat than we usually have. We usually have one or two, but we've got tons of them today. And it's
let's ignore them.
Well, I kind of am, but listen, I just wanted to tell you, it's a great sign. It means that they're panicking. It means they know that you're breaking through, Rosie. So thank you once again.
I think it's quite sad. I think if those people are just so desperate to sort of hate me, not meet with me, not listen to me, not understand what we're talking about, and they want to join something like this to hate us even more, I think that's quite sad. I think, you know. Go and watch Corrie. You know, if we're angry just by trying to discuss these things, that's, you know.
Yeah, well, it's quite telling that there isn't anybody stepping into the comments and making a rebuttal against anything you're saying, Rosie. Nobody's raised a really interesting point.
No one ever does.
You've said something that they disagree with in an interesting way. They're just attacking. They're attacking.
No, that's right.
You know?
Because I wanted to go back to what Rosie was saying, because actually, you know, Artie, those questions you raised, you know, some of those things I disagree with you. Because that's fine, because this is the point, isn't it? We do exactly as you said. We do need to have this discussion.
But can I say, Helen, that was just a thought experiment, but by our.
Oh no, I understand that, and that's this is my point, isn't it? This is absolutely fine. It's absolutely fine for you to sort of throw out these questions and say, what should we be looking for? And I could say, well, I don't necessarily agree on this, but I probably agree on this here. But this is the point. And we've been hearing that there is no conflict. There's no discussion needed. I mean, even today, one of the Labour politicians, I was saying earlier, was saying, this is what, you know, this doesn't come up on the doorstep, or we're not interested in it. It's the media that wants to talk about identity politics.
Absolutely does. I had two issues come up on the doorstep in 2019 in the general election. They were Jeremy Corbyn, every single door, obviously, Brexit because of my area, and 3 women stopped me, asked if they could speak in private. One was a social worker, one was a teacher, and one was a parent. They wanted to talk about this. And I was thrown because I hadn't even sort of entered the fray. I was thinking, oh my gosh, you know, how do I talk about this? And they were wanting private conversations about their concerns about schools and puberty blockers and all kinds of things. And I thought, wow, okay, this is something people are concerned about. It isn't just on my radar. So I was astonished. You know, I think I've had people, trolls and things, when they've heard me say that, saying, she's lying, what a load of rubbish. Why would I bother doing that? You know, I really haven't sort of ever thought about.
We know
making up
this
other
is not a lie.
videos.
Look at all of the women.
Yeah.
Look at all of the women standing up and supporting you. All of them saying we want to. Look at we get so many viewers saying we want to talk about this. We do want to talk about it. You know, but like I said at the beginning, you have now brought it to the fore, and it has to be addressed. I mean, I do think that Labour Party has to address it, and they have to address it coherently.
I would imagine there are lots of sand dunes being built for heads to be buried in as soon as conference is over. I don't think this is going to be something the Labour Party embraces talking about. I think it's going to
fester,
being ignored potentially.
That's a shame. That would be a real shame. Well, Rosie, we have a plan coming up, me and a few friends, and what we want to do with this plan is we want to find a date and make it safe for women to come out and to be able to speak about these issues on a certain date. I'll let you know about that, and maybe we can get some help on that, on getting that out there. Rosie, I genuinely cannot thank you enough for doing the show. It is absolute honor and a pleasure. I just watched. Oh, you're brilliant, and I just watched again your speech that you made you famous. I think about domestic violence. Someone pointed out that J.K. Rowling and yourself are two women who've been subjected to domestic violence, and you're both getting the same kind of thing from faceless people. And I just want to thank you for your bravery and say that whatever you decide to do, we're behind you 100%. So keep fighting, Rosie.
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
See you again.
Lovely to talk to you. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Well,
Wow.
that went okay.
Oh.
I don't think we stepped on any major landmines, but let's see what Pink News do when they comb through it.
But what an incredible woman, a superb speaker, very thoughtful, very compassionate and kind and caring. I'm very glad that she got the opportunity to talk about the things that she cares about.
It takes courage to be that kind of compassionate. Compassionate when you know that your compassion is going to make you a target and you still maintain your compassion. You know, this is something that people don't realize. People are so interested in appearing progressive. They don't realize that sometimes you have to stand against the current to really be progressive, you know, to really stand up for what's true and to really show compassion. And she's really doing that. And she's got principles. She's got a big heart. What a wonderful person.
Yeah, I think she's got a future ahead of her, that young lady, in politics. The other thing I wanted to just to quickly say about her is what I love about her as well is how casual and she was relaxed during that conversation. That's another lesson for David Lammy and all these out there. You could be like that too if you did a little bit of research and if you understood what you were talking about. You too would be able to get through a question like, do women have cervixes, without making an absolute fool of yourself.
And can I also say, those kinds of people, the kinds of people with that much grace and compassion and principles tend not to become politicians, to be quite frank. Politicians can often be more shrewd and calculating, or they just become shrewd and calculating because the system wears them down. So the fact that she's still in politics, she's still in service to the people, power to her. We need more people like that to stay in politics.
Bring back a minister for women and make Rosie minister for women. How about that? Let's do that. All right, everyone. What a lovely show. I'm delighted with it. Let's leave it before anything bad happens or the police. if the police knock on the door again. So let's just go. Okay. Let's just quickly end it.
Thank you. All right. Thanks guys.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you all commenters. Wonderful comments today. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Including the trolls. Bye-bye.
Love you, trolls. Mwah.